ladies and gentlemen, introducing Mr. Rajesh Nambiar, a visionary leader in the IT industry with a wealth of experience from top companies like Sienna, IBM and Tata Consultancy Services, with a Master's in Statistics and Advanced Management Program Certificate from Harvard Business School. He is well equipped to guide us through today's discussion. So today we are going to explore the multifaceted nature of this transition as Mr. Rajesh Nambiar unpacks the pivotal role that AI plays in reshaping industries and revolutionizing customer experience. Mr. Rajesh Nambiar to speak about transitioning to the AI-driven digital world.
Thank you. Thank you for the generous introduction, I must say, to Santosh. It puts a lot of pressure on you to sort of live up to the introduction and expectation in some sense. But since Mr. Rao started the trend, I want to start by saying, Bahumanapatta Sahodarale, thank you so much. Enne ivide kshanichathathil valare santosham. So kore varshangalukku munpu njan ivide Kozhikode vandirunnu. But the Kozhikode I see today has got a lot more progress. And what I saw in the since yesterday is very different Kozhikode. So I think there is so much for us to look forward to. And I believe that, this place has got a lot of future. I mean, when you look at next 10 or 20 years, I think I'm so happy to say that this will go a lot longer, a lot far than what most of us are imagining at this point in time. So with that, I want to talk a little bit. I know that I am not the first speaker to talk about AI in this forum, and certainly not the last speaker whom you will hear from about AI. But it is important for me to give you some context, and I thought I'll set some sort of framework and a context for us to look at AI when you hear about AI, which you're going to hear, by the way, for the next foreseeable future, especially generative AI and so on and so forth. So I want to make sure that we have a bit of a context when we look at some of that. Now, before we get into AI, I want to look at technology disruptions broadly, right? Technology discontinuity broadly, and I'll tell you what it means. So every technology discontinuity has actually created more human capital disruptions. So if you're with me, so technology discontinuity creates human capital disruptions. What I mean by that is, if you look at starting from microprocessors, starting from how the computers are invented, internet and so on and so forth, each one of these technology discontinuity, when it happens, it creates a lot of disruption for the human capital. The way we live and work changes because of technology discontinuity, right? So AI, and especially generative AI, is going to cause a lot more of that, and that's important for us to understand and get a sense of what those disruptions are going to be. And that's why, even though in the past few decades we have seen the rise of internet, the proliferation of mobile, clearly the advent of cloud computing, all of that, even though they had a significant impact on the human capital, what we are about to witness because of artificial intelligence is going to be very, very significant compared to all of those discontinuity, if you may, right? And just to make sure that we understand, AI is not a new word. AI has been around for 70 years, right? 1955, the first time the word artificial intelligence was used was 1955. But why is it suddenly it's gotten into fashion now? Because since then, there were a lot of jagged development of artificial intelligence, which means there'll be a period of quiet, nothing happens on AI, and suddenly there'll be a jump in terms of what happens. So there's always a jagged movement of development. If you trace the last few years, that's what's actually happening in the field of artificial intelligence. And the excitement we see for the last about 12 to 18 months is primarily because of the generative AI and the advancement that we've been able to achieve in the field of generative AI. And that causes this additional discontinuity, which actually will have a much bigger impact as we go forward into the future. So what is different today, right? I think it's important for us to say or at least understand. And before we come into Kerala and what Calicut could do, at least it is important to get a bigger context of what really goes on in the world. In my mind, the biggest difference, if you may, if you compare everything which has happened till now and what's actually going to happen going forward, is that till now, humans, all of us, you and I, we're trying to understand computers, but the generative AI, especially as a part of the broader AI development, first time computers will try and understand human behaviors. First time computers are going to mimic human intelligence. So it's kind of a reverse process, and that's why it's kind of scary sometimes, but at the same time, the opportunities that we could actually look at are enormous, right? And we'll talk some of that as well as we go along. So that is the biggest difference, and that too in natural language interface. So you no longer need a special language. So remember, when we were understanding computers, it was hard. We had to communicate in a certain language. But now, both ways, the way we communicate with the computer and the computer communicates back to us using generative AI is actually through natural language interface, whether it is English, whether it is Malayalam, it doesn't really matter, right? So that is going to be the key, and that is going to be the biggest change, if you may, which creates those discontinuity and hence the biggest impact. Now, of course, we have several examples of what this is actually, the impact of this on healthcare, whether it is in agriculture. So AI, for example, is helping doctors diagnose diseases more accurately, obviously, and then much more quicker, and hopefully a better diagnosis and a better patient outcome. Same thing in agriculture. If you see, it literally helps farmers optimize their use of resources, and of course it leads to better yields and sustainability and so on and so forth. So while all of us are familiar with some of these examples and what this technology could actually make an impact, I'm sure you all have much better examples than possibly what I mentioned. It is, if you look at a global economic impact, if you look at the global GDP and what this technology could actually do to the global GDP, is 2.6 trillion at the minimum to a 4.4 trillion in the next 5 or 6 years is what is estimated, which is, amazing considering the fact that today India's GDP itself is hovering around $4 trillion at some stage. So, and we also know that this impact can be both positive and negative, right? Of course, we also have to make sure that we understand, while we appreciate the productivity gains, while we appreciate the fact that this AI and generative AI in particular can really make a lot of impact, both for the businesses and for individuals, we also cannot forget or ignore the negative impacts of generative AI, right? So it's important for us to understand the risks involved with biases, for example, with deep fake and whatnot. We'll talk about that as well in terms of what is the right way for us to actually address some of that as we go along in this journey. Because if you don't balance this out, and then if you don't manage those risks very carefully as government, as industry, as individuals, I think we need to have a certain sense of how we're going to address some of that, especially given that, do you know that 45% of the world is actually going into polls in 2024? Not just India, not just the United States, but many other countries are going into polls, which means that there is a huge element of, deep fake, which could actually make a difference to the elections both ways, either positive or negative in some sense. So it is important for us to look at some of that as well. And in all of this, we believe that India has phenomenal opportunity and is very, very beautifully placed in the broader context of where AI is. And it has, from an opportunity point of view, it is one of the leaders. And I'll tell you why. Because we boast the highest AI skill penetration globally, right? We have 3 times more AI skilled talent than any other country. Of course, the previous panel talked about how the quality of the students and the stuff that they could do to make sure that we're getting the right quality, which is important. But it is also to be seen that if there is one country which has the potential to capitalize on the AI revolution, it is actually India. We can do a lot of things. Our leadership in terms of leveraging this talent ecosystem, the demographic dividend of India is going to be significant as we move into the AI world. So we've been seeing a lot of, from a NASSCOM point of view, when you look at the talent increase, whether it is on the broader segment of what the the workforce as well as the middle management and the leadership, you find that there's significant amount of talent which is getting built, which is getting trained as we speak. Now, while we acknowledge the exponential growth of this potential and the potential of generative AI, it is crucial that we understand that the technology of generative AI can actually progress even faster, right? I mean, we're already, growing pretty rapidly, but you will not see those impact because it will be limited due to the slow adoption of to change by human beings, right? And I want to stress that point, that the only way we're going to make progress is by humans working very, very closely with AI in general, right? Because if there is, it's only left to generative AI, there are things that which could happen which we don't want to talk about it here, but it is important for this collaboration between humans and AI, which is going to actually make the right difference for the organizations and individuals as we move along. So in some sense, because of the fact that you need those human interventions to make the technology really work, I want to argue that in the short term, when you look at 2 to 3 years, I believe that the generative AI is overhyped. People talk more about generative AI. Right? They say generative AI will actually take away all the jobs, or it will have the biggest impact on industries and so on and so forth. So in some sense, it's actually overhyped in the short run. But in the long run, if you take a 5 to 10 year view, then I believe it's underhyped. The impact that they could have on all of us and the industries and the countries and our ecosystem and communities is probably underhyped. The level of change that you will see after a little longer period of time is actually much higher than what we are thinking it will be. And in the shorter run is actually overhyped in some sense. So just make sure that you look at that as in two parts. In the short run, you're going to take a lot more time for us to get anywhere where the impact is actually being described. Now, what actually makes the generative AI technology very, very unique? Now, you know that this space is evolving continuously, influenced by various factors, such as demand for generative AI offerings, areas of impact, ecosystem developments, technology limitations, so on and so forth. But I want to call out a few things which has actually been the poster childs, if you may, of generative AI and the impact that you could see on the ground. First of all, generative AI is the greatest equalizer of our times at this point in time. What do I mean by that? Why is it an equalizer? So the significant shift that we are witnessing is the transition from a very code-driven development, right? And people have, let's say, if you take up technology development or development, code development as a area, we've transitioned from everybody writing code to what we used to call low code to today the point is no code, right? So it has moved on a significant way. And guess what is the most popular computer language today? Anyone take a guess? What's the most popular programming language of today? Yeah, I can hear somebody saying the right answers here. It is actually English. It's not Python, it's not C++, it is not Java. It's unfortunately, it's English. Because as I mentioned before, the natural language interface is actually going to generate more code than we can think of with any other programming language, because you don't need them, or you don't need all of them or all the time. So obviously in the right places you probably still need some of that, but the ability for to generate those codes will become a significant productivity measure from generative AI. But the equalizer comes from the fact that let's take the developer segment and then classify them into maybe a scale of 1 to 10. And let's say somebody is at a ranking 8 or a 9, which is really doing very well. Generative AI can actually help you, but maybe it'll improve your productivity maybe by about 10 or 15%. But let's say you are in the same spectrum. If you are in 2 or 3, you are in the lower end of the spectrum, you're not really doing too well. Guess what the productivity that you get from generative AI? It's about 80%, right? So in some sense, the differentiation that you had naturally, you're going to lose that. So the people with lower capabilities will leverage more from generative AI than people with higher capability. It is. I know it's you're just wondering what am I really saying, but it is true. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because it is a leveler in some sense. So it makes you it gives you a sense of trying to sort of play at the same level as some of the higher order higher performing colleagues of yours, if you may, right? So that's one. The second thing which I've always found is that, so the first was about the equalizer, second was about productivity, right? Those of you who've been around in the technology field for a while, you will remember that many times in your career, there will be some tool or something will come around, and then people will say, oh, this will make you 10x more productive. And I'm sure you've gone through this discussion, right? Oh, this is going to make us 10x productive. Unfortunately, in the last 40 years, that 10x productivity never happened. People have never got 10x productive, right? They were always the same, maybe a little bit more than what you did before with the tools, but not really, right? It's far from 10x productivity. But now, with generative AI, there is really an opportunity, it's still not happened, opportunity for you to become not just 10x productivity, but 100x productivity, right? So the leap, the quantum jump that you could have, because of the fact that you're using those generative AI capability in the right sense, will truly make you a lot more productive than you are ever imagining in many ways. So 10x was a myth, but 100x is a possibility, given that there are significant amount of capability which is getting from the generative AI especially. Now, also the third point I want to make, we talked about generative AI being an equalizer, generative AI being extremely productive, especially in some forms of our society. Not everybody is a programmer, so it applies to some pockets, but it also applies to others. Now the third point is impact on jobs, and I'm sure that's in somebody's mind. I believe that this is the first time around where there's a technology which is going to have a huge impact on also the white collar jobs. Because traditionally productivity tools, automation tools you would have seen usually impacts blue collar workers, right? So the technician who repaired the air conditioner today morning, he doesn't have to worry too much about generative AI because his job is going to be okay. There may be some impact, but not quite a bit. But the equity analysts who are sitting in the front row, or some of us who are actually have our jobs cut out by knowledge arbitrage, if you may, we might have to think twice, because the impact on the white collar jobs because of generative AI is far higher compared to the impact on a lower end of the job. So that's another big difference in the generative AI paradigm. As you see, right? So that's one thing, right? So I get this question all the time wherever I go, saying that, oh, what is the impact on the jobs? Is AI going to take away all our jobs? I want to say that AI does not take away your job. Somebody with AI will take away somebody else's job who's not using AI in some sense. So people with AI will replace people without AI, if you want to sort of look at that way. It is not that people will lose the job to AI. So it's a different way of looking at it, but it is important for us to know. So we actually did a study with Oxford Economics, one of the organizations, and they came around and took about 1,000 jobs, and then broken those jobs into about 18,000 tasks. And they figured out that it's not that the jobs are going to go away or getting replaced by anything like AI or people with AI. It is those tasks under these jobs will get automated. Which, for example, if I'm doing a job A and it requires, let's say, 10 tasks, maybe 4 of them will get automated or 4 of them will get impacted, but then 6 of them will still remain. So it is important that to sort of assess these jobs in terms of the tasks underneath those jobs, so that we have a good handle on what to do with these tasks, which are hopefully getting better productivity by the automation in some sense. So 90% of the jobs will have about a little bit of an impact, 5% of the of impact, but 52% of the jobs within those 90% will have a 52% impact, which means that you have a greater impact on a certain type of jobs, and especially as I mentioned before, it might have a higher degree on the white collar than the lower end of the spectrum. So I know I'm going to run out of time, but I want to also mention that how do we really succeed in this new era of artificial intelligence? And for Kerala and for Kozhikode, I think to think about is that the only way we can never really get out of upskilling and reskilling, right? That's something which always been the mantra, if you may, but I think it's even more relevant today. And the reason why, and people always ask me, what is the skill I need to really learn? So if somebody is going to school today, if they are entering their education, what is should they be actually studying generative AI or should they be studying AI? I don't know. It's important for us to know that learnability will be the only skill which will last, lifelong learnability, let's put it this way, because it is important for you to pivot into something new. If somebody is going to get into the workforce 10 years from today or 5 years from today, I can guarantee to you that there won't be generative AI by then. It will be something else, right? So the technology changes that we witness today is so rapid. There's no point in getting a 10th grader to totally focus on generative AI, so that because that's a in thing today, and before the time that he or she ends up in the workforce, you don't have generative AI anymore. You have something else which is coming up, which is probably a much better technology or a much more powerful technology compared to generative AI. So anyway, I want to leave you with that thought saying learnability as a trade, learnability as a skill is something that we all need, and especially those who are actually trying to enter the workforce, and those regions and cities and states which are actually trying to capture this wave of the new technology as they come along. So I just want to also mention that there is a huge need for transparency. What I mean by that is, I don't know how many of you are following what's happening even for a large company like Google. I mean, I don't want to mention the name, but if you see, there'll always be a need for transparency in how they do, because one thing which is worrying most of the people is the lack of transparency in some of the LLMs, and then hence the result of what really it churns out, right? I mean, when you have these artificial intelligence tools, so the transparency will actually lead to trust. If you know how it is being done, then there's a better trust. Let's assume that you have an AI engine which decides on which candidate to hire. There are 4 of you showing up, and if there's no transparency into how it is really being done, then you will end up having doubting the whole. Instead of doubting a person, now you're doubting the AI systems in some sense. So what will lead to trust over a period of time is actually the transparency that we can provide. But it's not very easy for us to do that, both from a technology point of view and from application of those technology into what we could do for our societies, for companies, for enterprises, and for individuals as well. So in conclusion, I just want to say we are at the cusp of truly a monumental shift towards AI, an AI-driven digital world, and our economy is well poised at this point in time. Those of you who are following the GDP growth, and we are, while we might be 5th and 4th and all of that, but we would get to the position of India as a country will be in the 3rd largest GDP, and most of that growth, even to then and then beyond. I mean, we do have, as you know, as a country, we have a vision of in 2047 we would be a developed economy, and we are talking about multifold in GDP. That will be driven by technology, there is no doubt. And it will be driven by artificial intelligence related technology. As I mentioned before, it may not be the same form AI and generative AI 10 years down the line, but it is important that we look at that as a vehicle. So technology will drive economic growth for us, for all of us, and certainly for Kozhikode. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
So before we wind up the session, since the legend is sitting with us, you have the opportunity to ask him any queries if you have a Q&A session. Yes. Can we have a mic passed? For the past 2 days, I would like to know your name also, sir, because for the past 2 days you have been entertaining us with amazing questions to all the speakers.
I am Shashidra Das, a science writer based in Trivandrum.
Okay.
Sir, I would like to Rajesh Nambiar, sir. You said that generative could be a leveler, a equalizer. It is slightly controversial, because we can even stop job reservation and the division of labor based on religious stratification with this leveler called GAI. Because it could even stop, even say a halt, a goodbye to, adieu to job reservation. It is slightly controversial. So please, what is your take on it? Because it is a great leveler, a IQ leveler. The future will be that of generative AI haves and generative AI have-nots.
Okay, so you're talking about a leveler when you have generative AI and when you don't have generative AI, how do you really level that? That's what I was saying, that it's going to be leveler in a different dimension, right? It's not going to be leveler. If you do not have generative AI, unfortunately, you will not be equal to somebody with the generative AI. So
you're thinking of a situation even people would walk around with their generative AI companion, meaning, so you get into an interview with the generative AI, which is fine, and then the person who is actually interviewing you will also have a generative AI with him or her, and then the conversation actually takes place between the humans along with the generative AI in many ways. So it is a given that as we progress into the new future, you cannot, I don't want to say generative AI, I think just call it AI, because remember, generative AI is a very, very small part of AI. AI is much larger, while generative AI might have made it look real, because the fact that it can generate text and videos and all of that, but there's a lot more to do with AI, so that's something which you need to have. So there won't be a leveler, unfortunately, between these.
Sir, do you think that the generative AI would scale up human brain itself?
Will it scale up human brain? I don't think so. But the idea would be for humans to leverage the generative AI.
The augment.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. The whole idea is the technology will augment human brains.
Thank you, sir.